Be me, 28, married to Daphne for 3 years. Thought I knew what I was getting into when we tied the knot. Boy, was I wrong. Daphne wasn't always like this, or maybe she was, and I was too blind to see it. Started noticing the changes about 6 months after the wedding. Suddenly, everything I did was problematic, or rooted in toxic masculinity. Couldn't even make breakfast without getting a lecture. Anan, why do you automatically assume I want eggs? That's gender essentialist thinking. Women don't all want the same breakfast foods. My face when I was making eggs for myself and asked if she wanted some too. Should have seen the warning signs right there. But like an idiot, I thought this was just a phase. Maybe she was reading too many feminist theory books for her book club. Figured it would blow over. Narrator voice. It did not blow over. Month by month, the rules started piling up. Couldn't say, "You look nice today," because apparently that was reducing her to her appearance. Couldn't compliment her cooking because that was reinforcing domestic labor expectations. Couldn't not compliment her cooking because that was taking her efforts for granted. Literally no winning move. Started keeping a mental notebook of all the things that would set her off. Don't hold doors open. That's patronizing. Don't fail to hold doors open. That's inconsiderate. Don't offer to carry heavy things. That's assuming she's weak. Don't let her struggle with heavy things. That's ignoring when she needs help. It was like living in a logic puzzle designed by a sadist. But I loved her, right? This was just marriage stuff. Everyone said the first few years were hard. Kept trying to be the perfect husband according to her ever-shifting rulebook. Began studying her moods like a meteorologist tracking storm patterns. If she came home and immediately started reorganizing the spice rack, that meant she'd had a bad day. Meant I needed to ask about her day but not seem too eager. Had to show interest but not emotional labor dumping. Whatever that meant. If she was quiet during dinner, could mean she was testing whether I'd notice her silence, or could mean she wanted space to process her thoughts. Wrong guess meant either, "You're so self-absorbed," or "Stop trying to manage my emotions." Started developing actual anxiety about coming home. Would sit in my car for 10 minutes trying to predict what version of Daphne would be waiting inside. Began crafting my first words carefully. Too cheerful? Stop performing toxic positivity. Too neutral? You're being emotionally unavailable. Tired from work? You're centering your own experience. The rules kept multiplying like some kind of social justice hydra. Couldn't watch action movies, glorifies violence and toxic masculinity. Couldn't watch comedies. Most comedy is punching down at marginalized groups. Couldn't watch dramas. Too many male gaze perspectives. Suggested we watch nature documentaries. Nature documentaries often have colonial perspectives on indigenous lands, anon. My face when we ended up watching nothing. Just sat in silence while she scrolled through think pieces on her phone. Meanwhile, I'm walking on eggshells made of eggshells. Sex became this weird negotiation process. Had to verbally confirm consent at each stage, which would have been fine if it wasn't combined with lectures about enthusiastic consent versus coercive consent. Are you sure you want this? You're not just doing this because society tells you men always want sex. Ma'am, I just wanted to kiss my wife. Romance died somewhere between the consent workshops and the PowerPoint presentation she made about decolonizing intimacy. Yes, she actually made a PowerPoint. Yes, I actually sat through it. Yes, I hate myself for it. Friends started noticing I was different. Stephen asked why I looked like I'd aged 10 years in 10 months. Couldn't explain it without sounding insane. Well, you see, my wife has created an elaborate system of social justice checkpoints that I must navigate to perform basic husband functions. Even thinking about it sounded crazy. Started declining invitations to hang out, not because Daphne said I couldn't go, but because she'd create this whole framework around it. Why do you need male friendship validation? What emotional needs aren't being met in our relationship? Are you using your friends to avoid processing your feelings? Easier to just stay home and watch her deconstruct every aspect of our existence. The breaking point should have been the grocery store incident. Went shopping together on a Saturday, trying to be a good husband, asked what she wanted for dinner that week. Why are you assuming I'm responsible for meal planning? That's invisible labor that women are expected to perform. Okay, fair point. So I started making suggestions. Why are you taking control of the decision-making process? I'm capable of choosing my own food. Stopped making suggestions, just walked beside her. Are you going to contribute anything to this process or just follow me around like dead weight? Literally could not win. Stood in the cereal aisle having an existential crisis while she lectured a teenage stockboy about how the shelf arrangement reinforced gender stereotypes. Why are the fun cereals at kid eye level while the healthy options are higher up? This teaches children that nutrition is an adult responsibility rather than a shared family value. Kid just wanted to finish his shift. I wanted to disappear into the floor. That night, she presented me with a 47-point plan for decolonizing our domestic space. I wish I was making that number up. Point 23 was about how the height of our bathroom mirror reinforced masculine spatial defaults. Point 31 was about reorganizing our bookshelf to center marginalized voices. Point 40 was about developing a more intentional approach to condiment allocation. I don't even know what that means. Still don't know what that means. Probably never will know what that means. But I nodded and agreed because that's what I did. I was the yes man in my own marriage. Months passed in this weird haze of hypervigilance, analyzing every word before I spoke, second-guessing every gesture, living like I was diffusing bombs instead of making conversation with my wife. Developed this exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix, the kind of tired that settles into your bones. Where even thinking about having to navigate another conversation felt overwhelming. Started working late, not because I had to, but because home felt like a battlefield. Office was peaceful. Nobody cared if I said, "Hey, how's it going?" without deconstructing the patriarchal implications of casual greetings. Could eat lunch without someone analyzing the privilege embedded in my sandwich choices. Daphne started complaining that I was emotionally withdrawing. But every time I tried to engage, it turned into an educational moment about my internalized problematic behaviors. Couldn't tell her about my day without it becoming a seminar on workplace dynamics and systemic oppression. Couldn't ask about her day without it becoming a lecture on emotional labor and gender expectations. Couldn't remain silent without it being stonewalling and conflict avoidance. Realized I was living in a no-win scenario, like that Star Trek test where the computer just keeps escalating until you lose. Except this was my actual life. And there was no Kobayashi Maru solution, just endless new rules and shifting goalposts. The moment everything changed was a Tuesday in October. Remember it perfectly because it was so mundane. Came home from work, she was in the kitchen, had her laptop out, typing furiously, looked up when I walked in. "We need to talk about your greeting patterns." Apparently she'd been tracking how I said hello when I came home. Had a spreadsheet. An actual spreadsheet, with columns for tone, eye contact duration, physical proximity, and emotional availability indicators. Showed me graphs about my hellos. I've noticed a 23% decrease in enthusiasm over the past 6 weeks. This suggests you're not prioritizing our relationship connection. Stared at this woman I married. This person who had turned "Hello, honey, I'm home" into a data analytics project. And something just broke. Not in an angry way, not in a dramatic way. Just broke, like a rubber band that's been stretched too far for too long. Looked at her spreadsheet, looked at her earnest face waiting for me to engage with this insanity, and for the first time in months, I just didn't. "Okay," I said. Went upstairs, changed clothes, came back down, and made myself dinner. She followed me around trying to continue the conversation. "Anon, we need to process this. Your dismissive response is exactly what I'm talking about. Didn't engage. Not rudely, not angrily, just didn't engage. Ate my pasta while she explained why my lack of engagement was problematic. Finished eating, washed my dishes, went to watch TV. She kept talking, kept explaining, kept trying to draw me into the framework. I just didn't participate, wasn't hostile, wasn't argumentative, just stopped playing the game. It was like I'd stepped out of the minefield entirely, just walked away from the whole elaborate system she'd constructed. Over the next few days, kept not engaging. She'd present new rules, I'd nod, and then do whatever I was going to do anyway. She'd try to start discussions about problematic behaviors. I'd listen politely and then go about my business. She'd attempt to assign emotional homework. I'd say, okay, and then not do it. Wasn't being mean, wasn't fighting back. Just stopped participating in the endless analysis and rule-making. It was incredibly freeing, like realizing you don't actually have to solve every puzzle someone hands you. You can just set it down and walk away. At first, Daphne seemed confused, kept escalating her efforts to re-engage me in the system. More spreadsheets, longer explanations, more detailed frameworks for how I should be thinking and feeling. I'd listen politely and then go read a book, or take a walk, or just exist without performing emotional labor about existing. Week 2 of my disengagement, she started getting frustrated. "You're stonewalling me. You're avoiding conflict. This is emotional abandonment." But I wasn't doing any of those things. I was present, I was polite, I was responsive to actual practical needs. Just stopped engaging with the endless meta-analysis of our relationship. If she needed help with something real, I helped. If she wanted to discuss practical matters like bills or schedules, I discussed. If she wanted to deconstruct the patriarchal implications of how I loaded the dishwasher, I smiled and nodded and continued loading the dishwasher however seemed most efficient. Week 3, she started panicking, could see it in her eyes. The realization that her entire system of control required my participation, and I'd simply stopped participating, like a video game that can't run without a second player. All her rules and frameworks and analytical tools were useless if I didn't engage with them. She'd built this elaborate machine for managing our relationship, but it only worked if I kept feeding it my anxiety and compliance. And I'd just stopped feeding it. The machine was starving. Week 4, the breakdown started. Came home to find her crying at the kitchen table, surrounded by printouts of articles about emotional availability and relationship dynamics. "I don't understand what's happening," she said. "I've been working so hard to improve our relationship, and you just don't care." But that wasn't true. I did care. I just stopped caring about her endless project of optimizing and analyzing every aspect of our marriage. Stopped caring about being the perfect feminist husband according to her constantly shifting criteria. Started caring about my own peace of mind instead. Tried to explain this gently. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Daphne. I'm just not going to spend my life walking through minefields anymore." "What minefields?" "I'm trying to make us better." And she genuinely believed that, could see it in her face. She thought all the rules and analysis and frameworks were helping, thought she was being a good wife by constantly identifying problems to solve. Didn't realize she'd turned our marriage into a doctoral thesis that could never be completed. Week 5, full breakdown mode. She was staying up until 3 a.m. reading relationship blogs, printing out articles about men who withdraw from emotional intimacy, trying to diagnose what was wrong with me. Because clearly, if I wasn't engaging with her system, I must be broken. Couldn't accept that maybe the system itself was the problem. Found her one morning with a list of therapists who specialized in emotionally distant partners. "I think you need professional help," she said. "I think I need a marriage where I'm not a defendant in an ongoing trial," I replied. That's when she really lost it. Started screaming about how I was abandoning our relationship, how I was giving up on us, how I was being selfish and immature. But I wasn't doing any of those things. I was just refusing to be managed like a problematic employee, refusing to treat my own emotions and behaviors like they needed constant oversight and correction, refusing to live in a world where every interaction was a test I could fail. The irony was incredible. She'd spent years trying to control every aspect of our dynamic, creating rules and systems and frameworks for how I should think and feel and behave. And the moment I stopped submitting to that control, she completely fell apart. All her feminist theory about agency and autonomy, but couldn't handle when I actually exercised agency and autonomy in a way she didn't like. Week 6, she moved back to her parents' house temporarily to get some space and figure out what's wrong with our relationship. House was quiet for the first time in years. Could eat cereal for dinner without a lecture about nutrition privilege. Could watch whatever I wanted without a discourse analysis. Could say good morning without wondering if my tone was sufficiently emotionally available. It was paradise. Realized how much stress I'd been carrying, how much mental energy I'd been spending on trying to navigate her emotional landmines, how exhausted I'd been from constant vigilance. Friends noticed the change immediately. Steven said I looked like I'd been released from prison. "You're actually making eye contact again, dude." Hadn't realized I'd stopped doing that. When you're always worried about your next mistake, you stop looking directly at the world. Daphne called every few days with updates on her processing. Had apparently found a support group for women with emotionally unavailable partners. Was reading books about narcissistic men and relationship trauma. Still completely convinced that my unwillingness to engage with her control system meant I was broken. Never once considered that maybe her control system was the problem. Week 8, she wanted to meet for coffee to discuss our path forward. Agreed because I'm not a monster. Still loved her, just couldn't live in her emotional panopticon anymore. Met at a neutral cafe. She had a notebook. Of course she had a notebook. "I've been doing a lot of work on myself," she said. "I've identified some patterns in our relationship that were unhealthy. Thought maybe she'd had a breakthrough. Maybe realized that turning marriage into a constant performance review wasn't sustainable. Nope. I've been too accommodating of your emotional withdrawal," she said. "I need to set better boundaries about emotional labor and relationship participation." She'd learned new terminology but hadn't learned anything. Still thought the problem was my failure to engage with her system. Not that the system itself was insane. Had a whole new framework for how we could rebuild trust and emotional intimacy. More rules, more requirements, more ways to fail. Just with different vocabulary. Looked at this woman I'd loved. This person who couldn't just let us be married without turning it into a semester-long seminar. And felt nothing but sadness. Not anger, not resentment, just profound sadness that she couldn't understand the difference between a relationship and a research project. "I don't think this is going to work, Daphne." That's when the real breakdown happened, right there in the coffee shop. Started hyperventilating, crying, saying I was abandoning her just because she wanted us to be better, saying I was punishing her for trying to grow, saying I was choosing toxic masculinity over personal development. But none of that was true. I was choosing sanity over chaos, choosing peace over constant conflict, choosing to be a person instead of a project. The waitress brought tissues. Other customers were staring. Daphne was having a full panic attack because her husband didn't want to live inside her control matrix anymore. Couldn't handle that her elaborate system of rules and analysis had failed. Couldn't accept that maybe, just maybe, some things in life don't need to be optimized and problematized and deconstructed. Maybe sometimes you can just love someone without turning it into a dissertation. Maybe marriage can be simple sometimes. Maybe not every interaction needs to be a teachable moment about privilege and power dynamics. But she couldn't see that. To her, my disengagement wasn't self-preservation, it was selfishness. My refusal to be managed wasn't healthy boundary setting, it was emotional violence. My desire for peace wasn't reasonable, it was regressive. The final conversation happened 2 weeks later. She'd had time to process some more. wanted to try couples therapy, but only if I admitted that my withdrawal was the primary problem. Only if I committed to doing the work of becoming more emotionally available. Only if I agreed to work with a therapist who specialized in deconstructing masculine defense mechanisms. More frameworks, more analysis, more ways to be wrong. Told her no. Not angrily, not dramatically, just no. I'm not broken, Daphne. I don't need to be fixed. I need to be married to someone who doesn't think I need to be fixed. That's when she completely lost it. Accused me of gaslighting her, said I was manipulating her into thinking her needs were unreasonable, said I was using my privilege to avoid accountability. But I wasn't doing any of those things. I was just saying no to living in her emotional surveillance state, saying no to being treated like a problematic student who needed constant correction, saying no to a marriage where love was conditional on perfect adherence to an ever-changing rulebook. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. She moved across the country, heard through mutual friends that she'd started dating someone new. Apparently, he's very emotionally evolved and committed to personal growth. Good for him. Hope he enjoys the spreadsheets. As for me, learn something important. You don't have to walk through someone else's minefield. You can just not. You can step outside their system of control and live your life. They might have a complete breakdown when you do. They might accuse you of abandoning them. They might genuinely believe you're broken and selfish and wrong. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's need to manage and control every aspect of existence. Sometimes you have to let people be responsible for their own emotional reactions, even if those reactions involve complete psychological collapse. Dating again now. It's amazing how simple relationships can be when both people are just trying to enjoy each other's company, instead of constantly optimizing and analyzing and improving each interaction. Met Sarah 3 months ago. She's great. When I complimented her dress, she said thank you. Didn't launch into a lecture about the male gaze and appearance-based validation. When I held the door open, she walked through it. Didn't require a discussion about patronizing gender dynamics. When I suggested we watch a movie, she said, "Sure, what do you want to watch?" Didn't need to analyze the representation and problematic themes first. It's revolutionary. Normal human interactions without constant meta-commentary. Conversation without performance reviews. Affection without frameworks. Love without spreadsheets. Sometimes Daphne still contacts me, usually late at night, long messages about how I abandoned our growth and chose comfort over consciousness, how I gave up on becoming a better person, how I'm perpetuating toxic patterns by being with someone who doesn't challenge me. Don't respond anymore, not because I'm angry, not because I want to hurt her, but because I finally learned the most important lesson. You can't save someone from their need to control everything. You can only save yourself from being controlled. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is just stop walking through the minefield. Let them stand there alone with all their rules and frameworks and demands, wondering why nobody wants to play their impossible game anymore. My face when I realized freedom was always an option. Just had to choose it. Chose peace over chaos. Chose simplicity over complexity. Chose love over optimization. Best decision I ever made. 10 out of 10 would disengage again. Anyway, Sarah and I are thinking about getting married next year. No spreadsheets required, just two people who like each other deciding to build something together. Revolutionary concept, I know. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is just be normal.